You ever feel like you've been walking a tightrope with your family your whole life, trying to keep the peace while quietly eating every jab, every slight, every rolled eye at your success? That's how it's always been with mine. My name's Harry, I'm 42, and I've spent most of my adult life being the responsible one. The dependable son. The one who remembers birthdays, fixes things around dad's house without being asked, and shows up on time wearing clean clothes and a forced smile. But the truth? I've always been the odd one out. I have one younger brother, Danny. He's 39, a single dad to two teenage boys, and the undisputed golden child of our family's twisted little universe. Growing up, he was the reckless one, the kid who got suspended for fighting or stealing or lighting something on fire, and somehow still got ice cream after dinner. Meanwhile, I brought home straight A's, paid my way through college, and got a lecture for bragging too much. It was always like that. If I did well, I was rubbing it in. If I struggled, I was being dramatic. And if Danny messed up, well, he had a hard life and needed support. I tried to let it go. I moved a couple of towns over, started my own family, and built a life I was proud of. My wife passed away 6 years ago. Cancer, quick and cruel. And since then it's just been me and my son, Jeremy. He's 17 now, quiet but brilliant, and easily the best thing I've ever done. Straight A's, varsity debate team, already accepted into 3 great colleges on scholarships. He's the kind of kid who still helps his grandpa carry groceries in without being asked, who says thank you to waitresses and volunteers at the library on weekends. And of course, that makes him a target. My brother's boys, Mason and Luke, are 17 and 16, built like linebackers, with the same bitter chip on their shoulder their dad's been carrying since we were kids. They're loud, messy, and angry at the world for things they'll never name. I've tried to be kind to them, bought them Christmas gifts, invited them to Jeremy's birthday parties, helped pay for Mason's orthodontist bill once when Danny forgot his wallet. But it never made a difference. They look at Jeremy like he's a walking insult, like every accomplishment he earns is somehow a dig at them. Still, I never imagined they'd go this far. It started the night before Jeremy's senior pictures. He'd been buzzing about it for weeks, carefully picking out the right outfit. Not just the usual cap and gown photo, but a full formal portrait the school was offering for scholarship portfolios. He saved up for a tuxedo rental, black satin lapels, crisp white shirt, the works. He even practiced his smile in the mirror, which for a teenage boy is saying something. We drove down to my dad's place that weekend, since Jeremy wanted to take a few photos in the backyard where his mom used to garden. I thought it would be a nice memory, something sentimental to mark the milestone. Danny and his boys were already there when we arrived. I hadn't expected that. My dad failed to mention they were staying for the weekend too, which I should have seen as a red flag. But I smiled through it. We shared a tense dinner, with the usual passive-aggressive remarks from Danny about fancy colleges and rich kids with tutors, even though Jeremy's been tutoring other students since sophomore year. Jeremy, bless him, didn't say a word. He's learned how to shrink himself when they're around, how to keep his head down and his voice soft. But I see it. I see the way he looks at me sometimes, like he's asking if it's okay to exist. After dinner, Jeremy went upstairs to hang his tux up in the closet so it wouldn't wrinkle. He'd brought one of those garment bags, the kind with the zipper and a little clear window. He even laid out his shoes and cufflinks on the chair beside the bed. He was taking it seriously. And why shouldn't he? He earned it. I went out back to help my dad with some patio lights, thinking the boys were watching TV. When I came back inside, Jeremy's bedroom door was open. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then I heard a sound, a sharp, muffled laugh, and saw Mason and Luke standing in the hallway, trying to look innocent and failing miserably. "Everything okay?" I asked. Luke shrugged. "Just checking if he's still alive. Didn't know nerds needed beauty sleep." I gave a tight smile and knocked on Jeremy's door. He didn't answer. When I stepped inside, the sight stopped me cold. The tuxedo, his beautiful, carefully chosen tuxedo, was ruined. Torn in 3 places. One sleeve hanging by a thread. The white shirt slashed through the chest. The satin lapel shredded like ribbon. I couldn't even speak for a second. Jeremy was sitting on the bed, frozen, his face pale and eyes wet, but not crying. Just silent, like something inside him had caved in. "Who did this?" I asked, already knowing. From the hallway, Mason snorted. "He always thinks he's better than us," he muttered. "Guess now he looks the part." I turned to them, my hands shaking. "You did this." Prove it, Luke said, smirking. Wasn't us. Maybe he tripped. Jeremy didn't look up. He just stared at the remains of his tux, his fingers gripping the fabric like he could still save it. And God, I wanted to yell, to scream, to demand my father come upstairs and see what his golden grandsons had done. But instead, I walked over to Jeremy, gently took his shoulder, and said, "Get your bag, kid. We're leaving." He blinked. "But the photos? We'll figure it out." We didn't say a word to Danny or the boys as we passed them on the way out. I think that's what shook them. No yelling. No threats. Just silence. I saw Danny frown, probably realizing something was off, but I didn't stop to explain. I opened the car door for Jeremy, tossed his things in the trunk, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe to a hotel. Maybe home. I just knew I couldn't let Jeremy sleep another night under the same roof as those two. It wasn't until the next morning that I got the call. My phone buzzed at 7:12 a.m. "Dad." I let it ring once, then picked up, still groggy from a half-sleep in a crummy motel off the highway. "Harry," he said, voice tight. "Please don't involve the school. Mason and Luke, they made a mistake. But they're good boys. They'll lose their scholarships." I sat there, staring at the wall, as the weight of everything slammed into me. They'd told him, which meant they knew they messed up, which meant they were scared. Good, but not nearly scared enough. And I hadn't even begun to decide how far I was willing to go. I didn't answer my dad right away, just held the phone to my ear in silence, while Jeremy sat beside me on the motel bed, still wearing yesterday's jeans and hoodie. He was pretending not to listen, but I could see his shoulders tense when he heard my father's voice. The kid didn't say anything, didn't cry, didn't even look at me, but the quiet way he stared at the floor like it was trying to swallow him whole, that said enough. "Harry," my dad said again, more insistent now, "I need you to let this go." "Do you?" I said finally, my voice lower than I expected. "Because I haven't even decided what to do yet. But you're already asking me to back down." There was a pause on the other end. "You know what I mean. They're just boys. They were messing around. Jeremy's fine, isn't he? You didn't say he was hurt." I stood up and walked toward the motel bathroom, shutting the door behind me so Jeremy wouldn't hear what came next. My hands were shaking again, not with fear, but something closer to fury. Not the hot, wild kind. This was cold, surgical, a betrayal years in the making finally surfacing in my throat. "You think a bruised face is the only kind of hurt that matters?" I said, keeping my voice even. "He worked for that tuxedo. He saved for it. That's months of allowance, tutoring, favors, skipping takeout. You think this is just about the fabric? You're blowing this out of proportion." "No, Dad. You're just finally seeing the proportions for what they are." Silence again. He didn't like being talked to that way. He never had. I was always the respectful one, the one who bit his tongue. Danny could blow up, curse, storm out, and get a pat on the back. But I was supposed to take the high road. Be the glue. Keep the peace. Not anymore. "I'll talk to Danny," my dad said at last. "We'll figure something out. But I need you not to go to the school. If the administration hears about this, the boys could lose everything. Mason's already on thin ice with his GPA. Luke's got that football scout looking at him this spring." "And Jeremy?" I asked. "What does he lose?" Dad didn't have an answer. He never did. I hung up. We ended up driving back home that morning. I called the school on the way and explained, truthfully, that Jeremy's tux had been damaged and we wouldn't be able to make the scheduled photos. The secretary was kind. She said we could reschedule during the makeup window next week. I thanked her, hung up, and glanced at my son. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Still got time. We'll find another tux. Better one, even." Jeremy nodded without looking up. "It's not the tux," he mumbled. I don't know. It just sucks." Yeah, it did. We got home, and I let him sleep most of the day while I made calls. A local formal wear place offered a generous discount when I explained the situation. I told them we'd be in tomorrow. Jeremy didn't protest. That night, I sat on the couch with a beer I didn't really want and let myself feel it. The exhaustion, the helplessness, and under that, something harder to face, the guilt. Because I'd seen this coming. Maybe not the tux, maybe not this exact cruelty, but the pattern had been there for years. The favoritism, the little slights. Jeremy was always the quiet one, the polite one, the different one. He was too smart, too calm, too decent, and that somehow made him less in their eyes. I'd let him go to that house knowing the wolves were waiting. And now he was carrying the scars in silence. The next few days passed in a weird limbo. Jeremy got his new tux. The photos went fine. He didn't smile as wide, but he showed up, stood tall, and looked every bit the young man he was becoming. I was proud, fiercely so, but also angry that such a simple milestone had been tainted. Then Saturday rolled around, and my dad called again. This time, he wanted to invite us to a family dinner. His voice was strained, too cheerful, too rehearsed. I knew he was trying to broker peace, to smooth things over the way he always did. They want to apologize, he said. Mason and Luke. Danny, too. Do they know what that word means? I asked dryly. Harry, come on. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I nearly said no. Every fiber of my being screamed to decline. But then Jeremy walked into the room and asked who I was talking to. When I told him, he surprised me. I'll go, he said simply. Are you sure? He nodded. Yeah. I want to see what sorry looks like to them. So we went. We arrived at 5 p.m. Dad's house looked the same. Peeling paint, overgrown lawn chairs that hadn't been moved in a decade. The kind of place where time just gives up and sits down. Danny's truck was already in the driveway, and I could see Mason's broad silhouette through the front window. When we stepped inside, the air shifted. That thick, awkward tension settled like fog. My dad met us at the door with an overly bright smile, ushering us in like we were guests at a hostage negotiation. There's my boys, he said, patting Jeremy on the shoulder. Look at you, all grown up. Jeremy gave a polite smile and walked past him into the living room. Danny was sitting on the recliner, arms crossed, a beer sweating in his hand. Mason and Luke were on the couch, flanking the coffee table like bouncers. Their eyes followed Jeremy, but their expressions were unreadable. I stayed close to my son. My jaw was already tight. Dad cleared his throat. So, boys? You wanted to say something. Mason looked at Luke. Luke looked at Danny. Danny took a long sip of his beer before speaking. We talked, he said flatly. And yeah, what happened was dumb. The boys got carried away. Didn't mean to ruin the tux. Just wanted to mess with him a bit. Mess with him, I repeated, trying not to raise my voice. Yeah, you know, like kids do. Like we used to do. I never shredded your clothes, Danny. He waved that off like I was being dramatic. Point is, it's done. They're sorry, right? Mason rolled his eyes. Yeah, sorry. Luke smirked. Won't happen again. It was so rehearsed, so hollow, I almost laughed. Jeremy didn't even blink. I accept your apology, he said. But I don't believe it. Mason's face twitched. Danny stood up. Hey, you don't talk to your cousins like that. They're older than you. I stepped in before this turned into something worse. Danny, sit down. He glared at me. What's your problem, man? We invited you here, didn't we? Try to make things right. No, I said quietly. You tried to make things quiet. Not the same thing. Dad raised his hands. All right. Let's eat. No more drama. Dinner was barely edible. Cold lasagna, wilted salad, and that same gnawing tension under every word. Danny cracked jokes that didn't land. Mason and Luke kicked each other under the table like toddlers. Jeremy pushed food around his plate and kept his mouth shut. Then, midway through the meal, it happened. Luke leaned in toward Jeremy and muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Didn't know crybabies wore tuxedos. Jeremy didn't react. But I did. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. That's enough. Whoa, Danny said, holding up his hands. Easy, man. Don't overreact. You don't get to tell me how to react when your kid is still mocking mine under your roof. Mason scoffed. He's just joking. Jeremy stood up slowly. Is that what this is to you? A joke? Danny raised his voice. Hey, you don't talk back to me, boy. Jeremy didn't flinch. You're not my dad. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even my father looked stunned. Danny slammed his fork down. Then maybe don't come around acting like you're better than everyone. There it was. The core rot, finally said out loud. Jeremy turned to me. Can we go? Yes, I said. We walked out without another word. Back in the car, I turned to him. I'm sorry. Jeremy looked at me, eyes tired but clear. Don't be. You raised me better than they raised them. That night, something in me broke for good. Not just the peacekeeping part. Not just the brother who used to try. No, something deeper. I realized they didn't just dislike us. They resented us for every choice we made that didn't look like theirs. For every time Jeremy succeeded without cutting corners. For every time I stayed silent, and let them believe they were the center of the universe. And now, silence was over. Because the next morning, I got an email from the school. Apparently, a parent had called anonymously to express concern about Jeremy's attitude. Claimed he was aggressive, entitled, and possibly bullying other students. They'd opened a preliminary investigation, and that was the last straw. I didn't sleep much that night after getting the email. I just sat in the kitchen, staring at my laptop screen, reading those lines over and over again. We've received an anonymous call expressing concern about Jeremy's behavior. Though no formal complaint has been filed, we are conducting a preliminary review to ensure a safe environment for all students. Safe environment. Like my kid was a threat. Like Jeremy, the quietest, most respectful student you could ever meet, was now under the microscope because someone couldn't stand the idea of him rising above their sons. I looked down the hallway at his bedroom door. Light was still on under the crack. He was probably up late studying, like always. Or maybe he couldn't sleep either. That email felt like a slap across the face, but it also confirmed something I had been too afraid to say out loud. This wasn't just family tension anymore. It was sabotage. I forwarded the message to my personal inbox, just in case, and started documenting everything. Every time Danny or the boys had undermined Jeremy. Every time my father had looked the other way. The ruined tucks. The smirks. The fake apology. The dinner where Luke couldn't keep his mouth shut. I wrote it all down. Not out of revenge. Not yet. But because I knew I needed to protect my son. And to do that, I had to stop pretending any of this was going to blow over. The next morning, I called the school and scheduled a meeting with the guidance counselor. Mrs. Ricci, an older woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone, agreed to see me right away. "We're not accusing Jeremy of anything," she said as I sat across from her in the small office. "But we have to follow up when these kinds of concerns come in, even anonymous ones." I nodded. "Can I ask what they said?" She glanced at her notes. "They claim Jeremy has a superiority complex, that he's been condescending to other students and making inappropriate comments about financial aid, implying that some of his peers don't belong here." I actually laughed, which startled her. Jeremy's been on financial aid his whole life. He's worked for every dollar of his success. He literally tutors kids for free. That's who he is. "I believe you," she said gently. "And frankly, nothing in his record suggests this kind of behavior. But we have to go through the motions." "Then go through them," I said. "But document this. The complaint is false. Malicious, even. And I believe I know who made it." She looked at me curiously but didn't ask. Smart woman. I thanked her and left. When I got home, Jeremy was sitting at the kitchen table, textbooks spread out, earbuds in. He looked up when I walked in, pulling one out. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "It will be." He looked at me for a long moment, then went back to studying. It was such a small moment, but it broke me. Because this was supposed to be his year. His senior year. The one where he gets to celebrate. To coast just a little after years of grinding. But instead, he was dodging landmines I never should have let near him. That week felt like walking through molasses. I went to work, kept up with emails, made dinner, asked about homework, but everything felt slightly off-kilter. I kept replaying the past few months in my head, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when the scales tipped. Was it when Jeremy got that early acceptance letter? When his scholarship made the local paper? Was it really just the tuxedo? Or was that just the final excuse? Then Friday came, and something shifted. I got home late from work, and Jeremy was already in the garage. I found him sitting in my old beat-up armchair next to the workbench, a shoebox open on his lap. Inside were old photographs, me and his mom, a couple of baby pictures, some school awards. He held a small framed picture of her in one hand. "I miss her," he said quietly, without looking up. I sat down across from him. "Me too." "She would have said something," he added. "About the tux. About Mason and Luke. She wouldn't have just let it slide." "You're right." He finally looked up. "Why did you?" I swallowed hard. "Because I wanted to believe it was fixable. That if I just kept the peace long enough, they'd come around. But I was wrong. And you paid the price." Jeremy didn't say anything for a while. Then he stood up, put the photo back in the box, and closed it. "I don't care what they say," he said. "I'm still getting out of here. I'm still going to college. They don't get to take that." That was the moment I realized something else, something powerful. They might have cracked me, but they hadn't broken him. Over the next few weeks, something in our house changed. There was a quiet determination in everything Jeremy did. He started running every morning. He applied for 2 more scholarships. He took on another tutoring gig. But most importantly, he smiled more. Not the easy, shallow smiles he gave strangers, but real ones. Earned ones. And me? I finally stopped trying to be neutral. I stopped answering my dad's calls. I unfollowed Danny on social media. I even told Jeremy I'd support him if he wanted to cut ties after graduation. You don't owe them anything, I said one night while we ate dinner. Blood doesn't make people decent. Thanks, he said. I was hoping you'd say that. Then, out of nowhere, something wild happened. Jeremy won an essay contest. A regional one, for high school seniors across 3 counties. His piece, about perseverance and dignity in the face of adversity, took first place. There was a ceremony, a little reception, and when his name was called, I thought my heart would explode from pride. He shook hands with the mayor. He posed for pictures. He gave a short, trembling speech. He didn't mention Mason or Luke or Danny, but he didn't have to. The crowd cheered like they already knew the story. I clapped until my palms hurt. Later that night, I got a text from an unfamiliar number. Tell your kid to stop running his mouth. You think you're better than us now? Game on. No name. No signature. But I knew who it was. I showed it to Jeremy. He looked at it for 3 seconds, then deleted it. Not my problem, he said. But I knew better. Because while we were rising, they were slipping. Jeremy's success was a spotlight, and some people can't stand to be seen in the dark. And sure enough, within a week, I started hearing rumors. Apparently, Mason had been caught cheating on a midterm. Luke had been benched for disciplinary reasons. Danny's hours at work were cut after a supervisor caught him arguing with a client. The house of cards was starting to shake. But we didn't gloat. We didn't text back. We just kept climbing. Until one day, one very specific day, Jeremy came home from school and handed me a folded paper. Thought you'd want to see this. It was a letter. Official school letterhead. Signed by the principal. The investigation into the anonymous complaint against Jeremy has been formally closed. No evidence of misconduct was found. In fact, several students provided statements praising his character and mentorship. The record will reflect his exemplary standing. I looked at my son. He was already walking to the fridge like it wasn't a big deal. But it was. He had been lied about, targeted, humiliated. And instead of sinking, he rose. I should have felt relief. And I did. But I also felt something else, resolve. Because now I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that my family didn't just want to tear him down. They wanted to erase him. And that could not go unanswered. Because what they didn't know was that I wasn't done yet. I had one last card to play. And they were going to feel every inch of the fall. I never thought of myself as a vindictive man. For most of my life, I believed in taking the high road, turning the other cheek, keeping the peace, for my family, for my kid, for my own sanity. But peace isn't peace when it's just you swallowing everything. It's just quiet oppression. And the thing about turning the other cheek is, eventually, you run out of cheeks. After Jeremy's name was cleared, I didn't celebrate, not outwardly. We had a nice dinner, just the 2 of us. I grilled some steaks, opened a bottle of the good soda he liked from when he was a kid, and we watched some old superhero movie we'd seen a dozen times before. He laughed at the same dumb lines, and I smiled like it was just another night. But inside, something had shifted. They came for my son's future. Not with fists or slurs, but with whispers. With that insidious, poisonous form of cruelty that tries to rot you from the inside. They tried to stain his name, his integrity, his worth. And now that the truth was out and their lies had failed, I realized I had a decision to make. Let it go again, or finally take the gloves off. You can probably guess which I chose. See, what Danny and his boys didn't realize is that while they were busy sneering and playing tough, I'd spent the last 20 years doing something much harder. Watching, remembering, collecting receipts, even if I didn't call it that at the time. I knew things they probably forgot they'd said. Things they didn't think anyone noticed. And most importantly, I had proof. I didn't move right away. Revenge, real, cold, precise revenge, takes patience. It's not about exploding in rage. It's about setting a table they never see coming and inviting them to sit down. So I started small. First, I called an old friend, Miriam. We went to high school together, lost touch, and then reconnected a few years back when I helped her with some contract work at the community center. Miriam works in admissions at one of the colleges Jeremy applied to. Not a big fancy name, but solid, reputable, with a good media studies program. Jeremy had been accepted, but hadn't committed yet. She answered on the first ring. Harry? Wow, long time. How's Jeremy? He's good, I said. Actually, I need to ask you something off the record. I told her about the fake complaint, about the retaliation, about the scholarship Mason had applied for through a foundation connected to the college, one Danny bragged about last year at Thanksgiving like it was already in the bag. Miriam went quiet for a second. I can't access student files, she said slowly, but I can say that if any applicant misrepresented their character or academic record in the application process, it's taken very seriously. I didn't ask her to do anything illegal, but I did mention that Jeremy had documented the incident with the tux, photos, timestamps, even a copy of the police report I'd quietly filed online after the motel stay, just to have a paper trail. Miriam was quiet again. That's good to know, she said. Sometimes decisions can be revisited, especially if new information comes to light. I thanked her. That was step one. Next, I reached out to Coach Ray. Ray's an old family friend. Used to coach football at our high school. Retired now, but he still runs a summer sports leadership camp that both Mason and Luke had attended. I donated to it once, years ago, and Ray had never forgotten. He was the kind of man who remembered loyalty. We met for coffee, and after catching up, I asked him plainly, "What do you think of Mason?" Ray shrugged. "Big kid. Decent player. Bit of a bully, though. Luke's worse." "What?" I told him everything. Not just the tux, not just the harassment, but the lies, the call to the school, the text message Jeremy got afterward, the paper trail. Ray didn't say anything for a long while. Then he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "You want my advice?" he said. "You've got the hammer. Just make sure you aim it right." Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact. "You remember Greg Thompson? Runs that statewide athletic mentorship board? He's one of the guys recommending Luke for that junior scholarship. Might be worth passing some of this along." That was step two. I didn't send anything yet, but I had the channels now. I had eyes and ears in places Danny and his boys couldn't reach. And all I had to do was wait. Because then came step three. Prom. You wouldn't think a school dance would matter. But in small towns like ours, senior prom is a big deal. Photos, flowers, limos, rented tuxes, all of it. Jeremy didn't even want to go at first. He's not the social butterfly type. But one of his classmates, a girl named Brianna, asked him in front of the entire AP English class. He told me about it with a sheepish grin. "I didn't even know what to say," he said. She just walked up and handed me a card with a crossword puzzle. The answer spelled out prom. "So you said yes?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "I mean, she's cool. We study together sometimes." My heart swelled a little. After everything he'd been through, the kid deserved this. So I pulled some strings. Rented a nicer car. Got him a suit tailored this time. Real silk. A watch that had belonged to his grandfather. I even offered to take photos myself. And then, like clockwork, Danny showed up. It was 3 days before prom. I was outside mowing the lawn when his truck pulled up. He got out, arms crossed, trying to look casual. "Hey," he said. I killed the mower and waited. "Just wanted to stop by," he said, eyeing the house. "Heard Jeremy's going to prom." "That's cool." I nodded. "Yep." He shifted awkwardly. "Mason and Luke are going too. Whole group of them. Should be a fun night." I didn't answer. Then Danny stepped a little closer. "Look, I know things have been tense. And I get it, all right? But maybe it's time we put this behind us. Family's family." I almost laughed. "Is that what we are?" I said. "Because last I checked, family doesn't try to ruin each other's lives over a tuxedo." His face twitched. "That was a misunderstanding." "No," I said, stepping closer. "It was a pattern. And you've run out of excuses." Danny's voice dropped lower. "You go to the school, the scholarship board, or those summer programs, and you're going to ruin their futures." I stared at him. "So, don't give me a reason to." We locked eyes for a few seconds. Then he got back in his truck and drove off. That was the final warning. And he knew it. Because while they had been playing games, I'd been setting up the board, gathering every thread. And by prom night, the trap was nearly closed. Now here's where it gets interesting. The school had hired an outside photographer for prom. They'd also arranged for the event to be live-streamed privately for parents who couldn't attend. Standard stuff. But what no one realized, except maybe one of the tech club kids, was that the live-stream feed backed up all footage onto a cloud drive. And I happened to know one of the tech club parents very well. His name was Marcus. We worked together years ago. His daughter was running the stream, and he owed me a favor, so I asked him to let me know if anything unusual happened during the night. And wouldn't you know it, at 11:46 p.m., I got a text with a thumbnail preview of a paused frame. Mason, holding a bottle, clearly not water. Luke, shirtless, yelling at someone off camera. And in the background, Jeremy and Brianna, standing far away, clearly uninvolved. The footage wasn't edited. No fancy tricks. Just raw, time-stamped truth. And the moment I saw it, I knew. It was time. I spent the next 2 days putting it all together. The photos of the tux, the documentation of the complaint, the police report, the text message, character letters from teachers who adored Jeremy. And now, a fresh video showing that the real troublemakers weren't the ones wearing bow ties and dancing awkwardly. They were the ones holding bottles and making scenes. I printed everything out. 3 copies. One for the school, one for the athletic scholarship board, and one for the admissions committee at the college Mason had been bragging about since freshman year. But I didn't send them just yet, because there was one more thing I needed to do first. The moment I'd been waiting for. The final piece of the setup. And that came 2 days later when my dad, who had been silent for weeks, called me. "Harry," he said, his voice cautious. "I heard there was some drama at the prom." I let that hang in the air. And, well, Danny said it wasn't a big deal. Just kids being kids. But then the school called. I smiled. They're reviewing the footage. Apparently, someone sent in a copy anonymously. "Imagine that," I said flatly. There was a pause. "I think you've made your point," he said. "Maybe it's time to ease off." That's when I knew he still didn't get it. "This was never about a point," I said. "It was about protection. You chose your favorite a long time ago. You made that bed. Now he gets to lie in it." My father sighed. "You're going to burn bridges you can't rebuild, Harry." I looked around my home. At the quiet, the safety, the son who still believed in good things. Then maybe it's time I stopped rebuilding them. And then, I clicked send. I didn't wait for the fallout. I sent the packets out on a Wednesday morning. 2 manila envelopes, one to the regional athletics board, one to the admissions office of that college Mason had been banking on, and an email attachment to the high school's dean of student conduct. I included a calm, professional cover letter for each, no theatrics, no angry rants. Just the truth, carefully assembled. Evidence of vandalism. A false and anonymous report meant to damage a peer's academic record. Video footage of inappropriate behavior at a school event. And finally, a pattern of bullying corroborated by multiple teacher statements, all of whom had responded to a quiet request I'd sent out through Jeremy's guidance counselor. There was nothing in the documents that wasn't true. No exaggerations, no speculations. Just facts. That was the beauty of it. No lies. No threats. No shouting matches or social media drama. Just reality, delivered like a slow-moving freight train. And then, I waited. It started with the school. 2 days after I submitted the materials, I received a call from Mrs. Ricci, Jeremy's guidance counselor. "Harry," she said, "I just wanted you to know, we've formally opened an investigation into Mason and Luke. The administration is taking this seriously." The footage from prom was the final straw. She hesitated, then added, "And thank you. Not just for Jeremy's sake. A lot of students are going to benefit from this." I thanked her and hung up, heart pounding. Not from nerves, but from a slow, rising sense of justice. That weekend, the real wave hit. I was out in the backyard trimming the hedges when Jeremy came outside holding his phone. "Dad," he said, trying to suppress a smile. "Did you see this?" He handed it to me. On the screen was a screenshot of a Facebook post from a local parent group. A long, rambling comment from a name I knew far too well, Danny Harper. "My sons are being unfairly targeted by a school system that plays favorites. Someone's been spreading lies about them and trying to sabotage their future. They're good boys. This is character assassination. We won't stay quiet." Below it, dozens of replies. But unlike the circle of enablers Danny was probably expecting, the replies weren't sympathetic. "Didn't your kid get caught drinking at prom?" Mine said he saw Luke shoving a freshman in the locker room last month. Maybe instead of blaming the system, you should ask why so many people are suddenly coming forward. It was happening. The curtain was being pulled back. I refreshed the thread later that night. The post was gone. Deleted. But the silence that followed was even louder. By Monday, the school had officially suspended both Mason and Luke pending a full review. They were barred from all extracurriculars, including sports, for the remainder of the semester. A letter was sent to all parents reminding them that conduct on and off school grounds will be evaluated when determining eligibility for scholarships and commendations. Jeremy got a personal apology from the principal, handwritten, but that was just the warm-up. 3 days later, I got a call from Greg Thompson, the guy from the statewide athletics mentorship board, the one Coach Ray had connected me to. "Mr. Harper," he said, very businesslike, "we received your materials. After conducting our own review, we've decided to withdraw our scholarship recommendation for Luke Harper effective immediately." I let out a long breath. "Thank you for taking it seriously. Frankly," he said, "we should have seen the warning signs sooner. But sometimes it takes someone outside the system to point them out." And then came the final domino, the college. It was a Thursday when the envelope came in the mail. I recognized the logo immediately. I didn't open it, just handed it to Jeremy and watched him read it silently, standing by the kitchen counter. After a moment, he looked up at me. "They're rescinding Mason's offer." My eyes narrowed. "Completely." He nodded. "Says here they found significant discrepancies in the character references and disciplinary history. They're reevaluating all applications from our school with updated information." He folded the letter and set it on the table. Then, calmly, he said, "It's done." I should have felt elated, triumphant, vindicated, but I didn't. I felt peace. A quiet, clean sort of peace. The kind you feel after setting down a heavy weight you didn't realize you've been carrying for years. We didn't throw a party, didn't gloat. We just lived. Jeremy graduated with honors. Walked across that stage in a pressed suit, head high, smile wide. I clapped until my hands ached. Brianna cheered from the third row. Even the principal gave him a nod as he handed over the diploma. After the ceremony, we took a photo. Just the two of us, standing in front of the school's brick wall, the summer sun painting everything gold. I framed that photo and hung it in the living room. As for Danny, he tried calling. Once. I let it go to voicemail. His message was slurred. Not drunk, but unbalanced. Like a man grasping for something that had already slipped through his fingers. "You didn't have to go that far, Harry. You didn't have to destroy their futures. They're just kids. Look, I made mistakes. We all did. But you were supposed to be the good one. Funny, isn't it? I was the good one. For years. Until I had to be something else." I deleted the voicemail. We didn't go back to family dinners. Didn't see my father anymore. Didn't check their social media or drive past their house or ask mutual friends for updates. We just let it all go. Sometimes letting go looks like forgiveness. And sometimes it looks like closing the door forever. Jeremy went off to college that fall. New city, new people, clean slate. He called every Sunday, sometimes just to talk about a philosophy class, sometimes just to hear my voice. I always answered. I remodeled the garage that winter, turned it into a little studio for myself, bought some woodworking tools, built a new desk, hung up old photos I hadn't looked at in years. One of them was of me and Danny. Kids, maybe 12 or 13, holding up fish on a summer dock, our arms around each other. I left it on the workbench for a week. Then one day, I took it down. Not in anger, just clarity. Some things aren't worth keeping just because they were there at the start. It's what you build that matters. And we built something good. In the end, the best revenge wasn't the suspensions or the lost scholarships or even the silence that followed. The best revenge was this. My son walked away untouched, and they'll have to live with the fact that they couldn't break him. Ever.